behavioral scientist with 50 years of corporate experience, working with companies like Boeing, the US Postal Service, and IBM. She's also the founder of Effortless Vitality. Today, we're going to explore the emotional issues people face after retiring. Please welcome the Queen of Courage, Sharon Rolph. Sharon, good evening to you.
Thank you for having me, Daniel. It's nice to be here. I love it.
Always a pleasure. So, I've been working for 40, 45, maybe 50 years, and I go into retirement. First day of retirement, my life changes. Um, what should I expect and what shouldn't I expect over the following years?
Well, let me say the first thing that will be kind of a wake-up call is that you're now spending money instead of saving money. That takes a little bit of a shift to get used to, but um, most of us, at least my age, I just turned 78, in fact, last week. We were only taught about financial planning for retirement, and that is very important. Yes, indeed. What we're not taught, and what's important to me as a behavioral scientist, is all the emotional transitions that come with um, what's missing besides your paycheck. Now, when I first retired, it took me about 3 months before I started bouncing off the wall, and I thought, how do I know if I'm productive? This is kind of important to me. And the same time I retired, I started coaching classes, and they taught us how to write our essence statement. And I had put it on a wall hanging here behind me. Some wise person along the way decided I shouldn't have it there, but I'm kind of leaning towards bringing it back because one day I read that essence statement 3 times. Oh, yeah. If I live from what matters to me, every day feels right. How many people can say that? Well, here's what I had created with my essence statement. I am precious jewel of wisdom. I am colorful collaborator, motivator, and learner. I am tranquil, authentic, and pure inspirer. I light fires. I'm here to light your fire because I've seen the free time in retirement as untapped potential. And potential means a lot to me. And your potential means a lot to me because your coasting in retirement is not an effective retirement. You might tend to become distracted, addicted, bored, let's see,
What type
irrelevant.
of addictions start to show up?
Well, it could be pornography, it could be drinking, it could be, well, probably golf isn't an addiction, but it could
An
be if you're,
escapism?
yeah, yeah. So, meaning and purpose is what makes retirement. It's the secret sauce of retirement is have a something that gets you out of bed and keep contributing instead of um, being stuck in distractions. And boy, are there distractions these days.
Mm. There was some recent studies showing fears that people have in retirement. And the number one fear was that they hadn't done their financial planning correctly. And you were mentioning here, people haven't prepared for their future, but you're discussing emotions. How often are emotions discussed in that retirement planning?
Well, they're starting to be discussed. And I actually wrote a book during the pandemic called Fresh Courage in Retirement, Finding Purpose, Essence, and Fulfillment. But I use this book a lot too in my writing because what retirees want is to be challenged, to have something to do, to be engaged. Boy, there is starting to be in the last couple of months a uprising on LinkedIn about people saying just because we turned 50 or 55 that we're out to pasture and have nothing to contribute. I'm sorry, that is not the truth. That is a myth that has been accepted over the last 40 years. Yeah, it might have been the truth for our parents, but sitting on the patio with a rocking chair was kind of what they looked at. My dad didn't expect to live past 73, and so he didn't. But my older brother and sister have passed on, but theirs was from accidents. But I think you kind of believe along the lines I do, that I'm in charge of my health. I decide what stops me, and I have never spent a night in the hospital. And in the epitome of health. Yeah, I have pains a little bit, but I go out and walk every day and feed dogs biscuits as I go out walking. That's my joy for the day.
A lot of men die early. And they were saying that it's actually better to retire later than earlier, because if you retire earlier, the likelihood of dying could be 11 to 16% higher in that first year than if you actually retire later. So they're looking today at the research that it's actually better to work longer. But I think there's a lot of conflict because a lot of people don't have a passion when they're working, and then they try to look for this passion after they stop working. What needs to take place whilst they're working to figure out what they actually like? Because, I see a lot of people and they work their whole life and they're great providers. They provide well for their family. They go to work every day. Like you, they don't have a sick day, but they've only ever provided. There's been no passion. Where does that conversation start?
Well, a lot of times, if we're fortunate, our jobs do provide us with a purpose. But like, I know there's a gentleman in my building here that I heard he had retired like 2 or 3 times. Well, now he's become the caregiver of his wife because she took a bad spell and has gone through a number of surgeries. So I find there's a tendency that men are such providers and fixers and doers that keeping busy is what means matters to them. So I was fortunate enough, Daniel, when I chaired a singles convention. In fact, that's one of the singles. Well, no, the what took me to Australia was at choir, but it was through the same organization. But um, that let's see, what was it? Where was I going with that? The
You're talking about the productivity, the busyness.
Yeah. Um, I lost my train of thought. Sorry about that.
A
That's
lot of type A personalities, men specifically, they've been obsessed with the boss the whole lifetime. They've been trying to prove themselves to upper management. And now they finish work, and who do they prove themselves to? What's the scorecard that they measure themselves against? Because a lot of people get their self worth and self esteem and their confidence from their work. And then once that stops, what's next?
well, in fact, I often like to say that when you lose your business card, your title, the team that you were working with, maybe what you're meaning to accomplish with your job, that goes missing along with your paycheck.
Mm.
And that's what's not talked about. Um, the sense of accomplishment, the sense of achievement, maybe making some goals, the relationships you had with the people that you worked with, your clients, the people you went to lunch with, and so forth. That's all gone out the window too. So there's a big gap. You don't even know why you need to get out of bed in the morning. That's that sense of structure that having a schedule does for us. So nobody tells us we're the boss now. I need to make the appointments to get my doctor uh, appointments scheduled on a regular basis. I have to be in control of my social health and my spiritual health and my physical health. In fact, I've used this symbol a lot this last year. I don't know. Yeah. So Dr. Neha Sanguin, she talks about 5 kinds of energy, and I'm really coming to appreciate I've I read her book or picked it up mainly because she has a whole chapter on emotional energy. And I thought, I might not have enough emotional energy. And I've really been chewing on that a lot. But mental energy, that's keeping your mind active. Spiritual energy has a lot to do with both appreciating my world, but appreciating myself and my talents and skills. Your social energy, I still need to work on that. I've been a introvert all this time, during the pandemic, and I didn't mind staying at home all the time. But I'm sensing the hunger of wanting to meet eye to eye, face to face is really growing just in the last couple months, and um, I need to figure out what's the best way for me to be um, socially healthy.
Mm.
So
You're mentioning emotional energy, and when I look at emotional energy, I see anger. And anger's not a negative thing. Anger's a positive thing because people who like to get results, they get frustrated. They use that frustration and anger as their fuel to achieve their result. And for people who are very intensely results oriented, oftentimes they have a lot of anger and frustration internally. And that keeps them alive. That keeps them moving forward. As an athlete, for me, for many years, I would set a big goal that I wanted to become the Australian champion. And every time I fell short of that goal, I was frustrated with myself. I'd get angry. And what I'd find is that emotional energy would recharge me to go to the next level. Okay, reset, relearn, go back to the competition, win, lose, keep moving forward. So there's the emotion of anger. Some people are motivated by optimism. And when they go to work, there's a lot of hope and there's a lot of optimism because there is a target, there is a mission, there is a vision, something that's long term. And some people get a lot of optimism. For me, I'm not a very optimistic person, I'm more pessimistic. But for me, there's other people who are optimistic. And once they retire, what's the mission? What's the vision? What's the promised land? They don't get that emotional energy. Other people strive on the emotional energy of stability. And going to work for 40 years and doing the same thing day in, day out gives them the emotional energy of stability. They know what's coming up in a year. They know what's coming up in 10 years. They can predict the paycheck and they thrive on that. But now, on day one of retirement, there's no stability, there's no consistency, there's no routine. And then there's those people who thrive on avoiding mistakes. And those people love going to work because they can avoid error and they like to get things right. And so they've got it right day in, day out throughout their working career. But now they get into retirement, there's nothing to do. So there's no potential for mistakes and they lose that energy. And so emotional energy from that perspective, for those people who are results oriented, if there's no goal in the afterlife of work, they don't get that anger and that frustration, that emotional energy. For the ones who don't have that sense of purpose, where's the joy? Where's the optimism? For the people who all of a sudden don't have a schedule, there's no stability. And the ones who have spent their whole life avoiding mistakes, there's nothing to get right. So where does that go? That's how we look at emotional energy and figuring out what's the personality type as they transition from work to retirement is a big consideration.
yeah, and I've said a number of times that people who have worked 60, 80, 100 hours a week um, probably don't have a support system as a backup. And I was fortunate that when I did this singles convention, my director had cautioned me about before the big event is over, have something else to go to, a new plan to look forward to, because that's pretty important mentally and physically. And so I had already considered 2, 3 years before I retired, what else would I go to? And I didn't have a whole big plan about it, but I retired in April, and January of that year, I'd gotten something in my inbox at Boeing that said that Boeing was cooperating with or building community with the community college there on for coaching. And at first I just kind of ignored it. But after a week or two, I thought, this program would be a natural progression of what I was already doing at Boeing. So I tried really hard to convince Boeing that uh, covering my education at this new course would be in their best interest. But no, they figured out I was on my way out the door, so they would be able to benefit from it. But if they had a longer vision that I would make me a better citizen, they might have at least helped me with my education. But it was a $10,000 class, so that came out of my pocket. But so when we don't have the support system, you don't have you might not have people to go golfing with, well, bowling either. You haven't done a book club of compadres that like sharing what they're reading. You might not have people that do the same hobby as you do. And in fact, I remember meeting with my Edward Jones lady before I retired, and she had, I guess about a year before that, had another single gal that had retired. 2 weeks later, this lady died. And it's not uncommon that when you don't have a purpose after retirement and that support system, there's no reason to get out of bed. And that's pretty sad because they've saved all this time and financial to live on, and they have no use for it once they've passed on.
When I retire, then I'll fill in the blank. It's a tough position to be in. Also, with coaching, I think a lot of people have similar frustrations in businesses because in a business, there's normally about 6 different people that you'll coach. And unfortunately, it's the poor performers who tend to get the most coaching. The plateaued performers, the people who have been good and now are just kind of flatlining. Flatlining is not bad. You know, if you can save $100 a week for most of your life and get into retirement, there's more than $1 million in your bank account. Plateaued is not a bad thing. But a lot of people who deserve coaching don't get it in organizations because it's given to the wrong people. A lot of times coaching is given to people as a punishment, as a way to performance manage them out of an organization. But a big group of people who don't ever get coaching are new performers. And if we thought about retirement differently and said somebody who's starting retirement is a new performer, this is the first time you've retired in your whole life, it's totally new to you. Let's coach you through the process. But a lot of people think, well, I'm not an athlete, only athletes get coaching. No. If you can learn it, then you can coach somebody to become better at it. So I think with people who are entering retirement, look at it as a new venture. You're starting a new period of your life. And the people who do receive coaching at the very start end up getting to become a high performer a lot faster. As an example, my son Caesar has had skateboard lessons every week for about 3 years. And we didn't let him go out and learn by trial and error. Because if I gave him a skateboard and no protective gear, chances were he was going to hit his head on the ground and do some serious damage. Or he might try something too big too soon, too much risk, fall down, break his arm, and he won't want to play again. So I've had him in skate lessons. He's got his private coach every week for the past 3 years. And what's interesting is got all of his foundations in place. He knows what's safe, what's unsafe. He knows what's right for him at any given time. And as I assess the other children at the skate park, he is much further down the path than they are. Now, he only practices once a week, but because he's getting coaching, he's getting the right advice at the right time. And what a lot of people don't realize is that even if you had the poorest coach in the world, according to the International Coaching Federation, average coaching gets a 7 times return on its investment. So you can be 7 steps ahead of everybody else. But if you find a good coach maybe even a great coach, somebody who's already walked that path and they're getting the results that you want. PricewaterhouseCoopers show that executive coaching, really good coaching, can get a 7 to 42 times ROI. So imagine that you're starting retirement for the first time. You've got a coach, and your retirement is 42 times better than everybody else's. Your sex is 42 times better than everybody else's. That's what we all want. We want the good stuff. So coaching's
Yeah,
for everyone.
yeah. There's a couple big principles about um, coaching that often isn't talked about enough, and one is the intention. Your son probably had an intentional goal uh, for maybe each year, or at least 5 or 10 years of either competition he wanted to do, or people he wanted to impress, or awards he wanted to get. The other thing is accountability. We often will do better when we know we have to give accountability to someone. And that's one of the huge benefits of having regular meetings with people, with a coach, is that, oh, I have to show up and I have to at least look good and look, like I tried. And so the intention of having a purpose when you're 60 years old is a very good intention to set, because you're already, what's the term, that your mind, what you think about happens, and having the intention that you'll know when you retire that I have already chewed on some things for possibilities, like either dreams that you had never had time to do. In fact, one of the terms I like a lot, that the beginning of my book, fresh courage, that oftentimes when we've been on vacation and there's a small voice that talks to us in those quiet moments, that the dream might scare us, but it also probably gives us a great deal of joy, because, oh yeah, I would like that, but it does scare me to death. Now, when you're in retirement, you've got the time to work on that. Maybe maturing your hobbies into a business, or at least helping teach somebody else what your skills are along the way. So, what do you think of that?
A dose of fear is not a bad thing. When you put your toes over the edge of the cliff and you look down, you feel butterflies in your belly, you feel alive. And a lot of people haven't felt alive most of their life until they do something that scares them. And then they feel alive. So a dose of fear is good. When I was an athlete, the bigger the tricks, the more dangerous the tricks, the more joy I got from what I was doing. But if I just did the mundane tricks day to day, there was really no excitement in it. It was just ticking the box. That was it. But you do something out of your comfort zone and you feel alive. Talking about intentions as well is another misconception with coaching, is that a lot of people don't like coaching because it feels like an interrogation. And a coach should ask questions. So you sit down and the coach asks you a lot of questions, but you don't have those neurological pathways to answer it. You don't know what you like. You don't know what you dislike. And so a lot of people get frustrated with coaches. What we have to understand is that you don't always have to have your own intention. You can borrow someone else's intention. And it's like a lot of us when we start work for the first time. We don't have an intention because we can't see far enough down the track. Like you're saying before, people at 55, they don't have value. No, they do. They've been on that path for 25 years more than everybody else. They can see further backwards and further forwards. So Caesar, when he started skateboarding, he didn't have his intention. As the father, I set his intention. Okay, we're going to learn a sport. I know you don't like these things. I know you like these things. And we'll go and have lessons for as long as you enjoy yourself. And for as long as he was enjoying himself, we kept funding the coaching. Now that he's at a place where he can set his own intention, he can tell his coach, this is what I want to do this week. This is what I want to do next week. And so we don't always have to have our own intention. Not all of us are all creative. I'm not a very creative person, but I've borrowed other people's intentions. I've said, you're doing that. Tell me how to do it. I like that, and we'll figure it out on the way. So you can have your own intention, or you can have somebody else's intention at the start. And that's where good coaching comes into play. A good coach should balance between questions, asking questions, and telling and giving some advice. It's what I do. I
Yeah.
have these scientific reports and I look at them and I tell my client, "Do you know you're good at this? Do you know you're good at that? Do you know you've got this special skill?" And they go, "Oh my gosh, I never thought about that." So we've got to do a bit of telling and a bit of coaching, and that is a lot better for the outcomes. You can find your own intention along the way.
Yeah, it reminds me of the first time I saw an example of a coaching. I hadn't even signed up for this class yet, but I was looking at it as a possibility, and they were doing a demo with somebody from the audience, and um, the gal, she didn't know what she wanted. Those dreams that she
Mm.
didn't know the answer to the questions. So they kind of paused a little bit, and they said, "Well, let's imagine you do know what you want. What would it look like?" It's more silence, but it draws on that subconscious that you're not, you can't name at the moment, but it assumes at least you'll go in the right direction with you might surprise yourself, and that's part of the joy of the coaching is, oh yeah, I forgot that I knew that, kind of drawing on that.
That self-discovery, that's the exciting part, and most of us go through life doing things that we don't like, and we say, "I don't like that, I don't like that, I don't like this business, I don't like that boss, I don't like commuting," and through all of the things that you don't like, you finally figure out what you do like. And even when you look at a menu, for most people, 99% of the people, they'll go to a restaurant and they'll look at the menu and they'll say, "I don't like that, I don't like that, I don't like that, I don't like that. I'll have that one." And that's like with life. There's a menu of a million different things to do, but you've just got to be open to exploring them. Okay, try it. If you like it, keep doing it. If you don't, stop. There's no
Yeah.
negative consequence of trying. You'll figure it
Well,
out whether you like it or not.
another principle too in that, and I use it somewhat in my life. My friend Barbara McCoy. Um, I hung around her house quite a bit because she had three teenagers. I was probably a little bit older than her teenagers, and I guess I later found out that she kind of hoped that one of her sons would marry me. But I admired something about Barbara that I mean, it took me 15, 20 years later, but I realized I had admired her so much that I assumed that same kind of um, lifestyle or belief system. She was always complimenting her young people um, on the things that she wanted to see more of. Maybe they were polite, or maybe they were um, kind. And so she would compliment them so she would get more of it. And because I admired her skill, before I knew it, I had taken on some of her uh, style of living, and it's fit to a certain degree my style too. So yeah.
I remember when I was learning how to coach, I went and learned from many people, and I just took a little bit from each of their styles. I said, "I don't like that. Doesn't mean I don't like them. Doesn't mean it doesn't work. It's just that's not for me." There's a lot of coaches who get on stage and jump around. That's cool. It's just not me. And so I don't take that and I leave that on the side. They still are successful, and I go and do something else. And throughout life, there's going to be many things. It's like eating food. There's things that we like, there's things that we don't like. I didn't like eating mushrooms, and I come from a family of mushroom growers. Today, I love mushrooms, but then I learned it's just an acquired taste. And some things that you might not have liked during your working years, you might actually find that you start to like them in your yearning years. And so be open to it. I think that's the most important thing with emotional intelligence is it's the willingness to try something new. It's the willingness to do something with no attachment to the outcome. We call it outcome independence. A lot of people do something because they expect a certain outcome. And when they don't get the outcome they were looking for, they feel disappointed. So you've got to do things like going and singing in the choir without an outcome. I'm going to go and I'm going to see if I like it or not. You might figure out that you went there to learn how to sing, but what you actually got was a group of new friends. And that might have been the most transformative thing. My wife and I, we went to see one of our friends, Kathleen, sing in a choir here in Taiwan. Uh, I don't particularly like going to the church; it's not my place. But when I got there, I realised that I wasn't the only man who doesn't like to go to church. So I talked to the other men, and they said, "Did your wife drag you along?" I said, "She did." And he said, "Did you enjoy yourself?" And I said, "I did." And I met a lovely group of men. But also, it's led to a better uh, relationship with our friend because we know more about her. We start to see this talent that we would have never seen before because we weren't attached to the outcome. Go in there with an open mind.
Yeah, one of the new things I'm learning, I have talked a lot on podcasts and even online, Facebook and LinkedIn about feeling invisible my whole career. And in fact, it is one of the things that happens when you don't have a purpose and meaning in retirement is feeling invisible. You start turning down invitations to social events. Maybe I've had to go get some hearing aids because I felt like I was missing out on what other people were saying and being engaged in conversation. So there's things that start, oh, yeah, I might need some help. But um, that was leading to, that I just a couple of weeks ago, Daniel, I decided it was time for me to take off that feeling invisible skin. Snakes shed a skin. And so it's time for me to move past that belief about myself.
Mhm.
And as I was going to sleep that first night, I thought, okay, what would I want? Oh, I need a new persona. That's what I need. So that became my new hairdo style. Let's have something more exciting. I thought maybe I need to choose some different colors to wear, and I still haven't quite know how the emotional intelligence will change, or my boldness, or but using this fresh courage term phrase, um, it will evolve in the right time and the right season. So does that kind of go along with some of your examples?
Well, I was going to ask where you live, once a snake sheds its skin, does the snake go and slither back in that old skin?
I hope not.
They don't either here. It's natural.
Yeah.
It's natural to change, it's natural to grow, and we've got to learn to shed off those old layers. And I think that feeling invisible probably is more obvious when we retire, but it's also there in 40 years of people's career. And I see a lot of people in their 40s, they say, I speak and people don't listen. I
Oh
walk
yeah.
past people and they don't know my name. My wife and I and our children, we're recognized in so many places that we go. One, I'm Australian and I'm 6 foot and 100 kilos and I'm twice as big as everybody else here. I'm easy to spot. But because we're not shy, we have confidence. We're willing to speak up. We're willing to ask questions. We're willing to make new friends and associates. And we're constantly recognized. We live in a small country, 25 million people, and people will always stop us and say, "Oh, hello." And they'll remind us where we've seen them before. And my wife and I will say, "I didn't recognize them. I would have never have known." And so they're recognizing us, and it's a nice feeling. But if you've never been recognized and you're feeling visible, it's a terrible feeling that nobody remembers your name. And we've got to start to step out of that comfort zone. And with emotional intelligence, there's 5 factors. There's self-awareness and there's self-regulation. And then there's motivation. And motivation, we need a lot of it in this lifetime. And there's 3 parts of motivation. There's biological motivation. Everybody is motivated for the minimum, for survival. It's beyond survival that gets you to greatness. And a lot of people who have been working, they've worked without a purpose. They've worked to pay the bills. They've worked to pay the mortgage. They've worked to pay the debts. And they get these physical things, they get these tangible things in life, but it doesn't come with a lot of joy. Joy comes from the intrinsic motivators. And it's when you wake up in the morning and you're doing that thing that you love every single day. And you get this feeling, and you would say to somebody, I'd do this even if they didn't pay me to do it. That's how much I love it. But that's not going to show up miraculously. You've got to start working on that throughout your life. And even with Caesar and his skateboarding, I say to him, I say, Caesar, if you learn this skill today and you practice it, you'll be able to take that skill set anywhere in the world. Because I was an Australian champion athlete, I was a wakeboarder, and I could travel around my country and I was welcomed everywhere I went because I had an exceptional skill. I went from Australia, I went to the United Kingdom, I went to the United States, I went to the Philippines, I went to the United Arab Emirates because of a skill. And because I had developed that skill to such a high level, I was in a position of authority. So I'd get on the television, in the newspapers, etc. And people would remember who I was. And I'd say to Caesar, if you learn this skill of skateboarding, you can take your skateboard all around the world and you'll make friends quickly with all the other skateboarders. And that's important. And then once you decide what you want to do with that skill, you can either maintain it or you can take to a competition. But there's no pressure. You don't have to compete, but at least have a really good skill set. So that intrinsic motivation for Caesar, he loves to skateboard. He'd go skateboarding even if the lessons weren't on. And all of us have to find that thing. What is it that makes your heart tick? Is it singing in a choir? Because when you sing, other people get the joy of hearing. And God gets a return on his or her investment as well. So we've got to find those things.
Yeah, I make these little art blocks, and I love sewing. I love color, and I love words of wisdom. And this is that kind of goes along that. When you see what you're here for, you often find yourself on stage in a play written expressly for you. And I've actually heard a couple of actors say that, like they felt like the script was them and playing the part was just flowed from them. In fact, my company is called Effortless Vitality, and I want that for everyone. Now, I've been watching a couple Hallmark movies. I love Hallmark movies, but um, the ads for Christmas coming on. There's so many of them, but it just dawned on me like yesterday that the love and the joy that's expressed through the holiday season is the perfect. I still need to work on knowing where my energetic joy is, or the joy that gives me energy, and yet so the ocean is just about a mile away from me, and I'm trying to get myself in a habit of going down there every week and putting my feet in the sand. Now, I think a couple days ago when I did that, my feet might have gotten too cold, and I came down with this cold. Oh well, but I followed up on my intention and the grounding that does for me. So I I'm wanting to do a really good get really good at helping other people give themselves permission to live from their heart and have joy, because there's so many times the scripture talks about that your joy may be full. We've forgotten that, or we haven't been taught that. And in retirement, all this free time is your license to pursue what gives you joy. One of the things I wrote, I think it's been about a year and a half ago now, a course on volunteering. And the beauty of volunteering is that it makes you feel good. Nobody tells us that. But I remember as a 14-year-old, my mom said, well, when you help so and so with what they needed, it was somebody in the church, and don't remember what it was, but you make them feel good, but you feel good also. Well, that's a easy street to feeling good, is volunteering. But I had somebody on my podcast a few years back that was a AARP president of Washington State, and he came on with 9 things that you get from volunteering. It does impact your social health, and your mental health, and being physically out the door, having to, someplace to go. And in fact, I think he said he volunteered 3 or 4 different ways in each week or each month. And but one of the big lessons he learned, probably the hard way, is don't just accept any volunteering job. Try it out, because too many times they forget to train you. Move on. Find the right match for you, so you matter and you fit in and you make a difference.
Yes, I do agree. One thing that I believe a lot of people struggle with giving is that today in the workplace, you get an hourly income for a lot of people, or a salary. And a lot of people have given 100% of what they've got, and then realized that the company didn't give them a fair return for their effort. So they start to reduce what they give, and giving becomes painful. Giving becomes painful. And this is why a lot of people end up working for themselves. They become entrepreneurs. They say, well, I'd rather give 100% to my customers, and I get to enjoy a bigger reward, whatever that reward is. It might just be the time of doing what you love. With my business in coaching, is a coach can't put the money first. A coach can never put the money first. They got to put the money down the list. And you should get paid for doing a really good job. Because unfortunately, in this industry, if you're only delivering based on what you get paid, you're going to withhold on your customer. And that's not a good result. Like a doctor, if you go in for a heart surgery and the doctor says, well, I'm only earning $150,000 a year, and that's half of what I should be getting, and he only does half effective heart surgery, somebody's going to be upset. So what I learned was that if you do a good job, the money will follow. And if you can give freely in the right environment, what you will get is you will get the joy. And that's very important. And we all need that.
Well, it's kind of interesting. I haven't made much in my income yet,
You've
but
been busy.
I'm from a farm, and I have said I decide what stops me. So I actually picked this line up from a conference I went to. And one of the things they sent home with us is you never underestimate the power of a planted seed. So I have been kind of like, okay, I need my harvest from my planted seed. But a tree, any kind of tree, any kind of seed is I think it's that whole reciprocity from both volunteering that comes with feeling good in each other, but my seed has an impact down the road of how many lives, that ripple effect, that if I give you a seed that makes your day better, or you carry it through the next week, and boy, I'm chewing on that seed that I got on Sunday, that it has, then you share it with your wife or your son, and then they share it with their friends and crowd that they're in. That to me, the power of a planted seed is a return that I cannot fathom for a reward. But I listened to something just earlier today that sounded like the day is soon coming where all we have to be is ourself, and the world is waiting for us to contribute what exactly we are here for. And that's part of what that statement means to me. Another line that helps with that transition is I have you forgotten who you are? That's from the Lion King. And yeah, a lot of people in retirement have forgotten that they're still their education. They still have their colleagues from college and high school and even grade school, that they're still that talented trombone player that they were in high school. And something about our mind kind of like, well, that doesn't count now, but it's still inside. In fact, I have been starting to work with a lady that has changed the dementia industry. in a very small way, but significant. And she told the children of the dementia patients to bring in, if they played an instrument, bring it in, and they start out, the dementia patients, with moving their fingers and kind of helping them remember what they learned, in school. And then they put on concerts, and she said one of the Christmas plays they did, there was 100 people that came, and the music has an amazing way of being remembered in our circuitry, and she got such a blessing, a kick out of seeing these people be normal human beings, but in a situation where they were connecting a lot with miniature animals, and having their being able to walk around the house in a way that doesn't constrain them. And it was just a beautiful thing.
As you were saying about the seed has a very simple instruction, and it's to grow. That's it, just to grow. That's it. And your goal is to just plant the seed in the right environment. And that's what we learn from epigenetics. The environment is so influential. The internal environment, how much you think you're worth, and also the external environment, putting yourself in an area where people see worth in what you do. So important. Sharon, thank you for joining us. Where can our guests learn more about your movement and what you're doing?
My website is effortlessvitality.org, O-R-G, and I have several of these things that are on the Great Discovery platform. My book is out there. It's also on Amazon. My volunteering course is on the Great Discovery platform. And something I've been posting on this last week is, who could you possibly become in the future? And that's on my ebook out there called What Makes Your Heart Sing. If you've forgotten what makes your heart sing, you'll want to peek at these 48 ideas. That's all the way from simply doing a garden in the roundabout near your house to touching the water in 7 oceans. I'm helping you dream a little bit. So I'm very active on LinkedIn, Sharon Rolph, R-O-L-P-H, and on Facebook. And I'm here to inspire and encourage you and bring out your best. And one of the connections I've made recently with AI is that my spirit, my uniqueness AI cannot compete with my unique intrinsic motivation. When I know who I am, I can stand up with confidence against the competition of AI.
Sharon, thanks for joining us. Thank you so much.